the governor.
Well, good afternoon. I don't need to tell all of you what we're experiencing here as a state as it relates to this oppressive heat wave and these rather extraordinary weather conditions that all of us are struggling through, many of us suffering through. Impact not just here in the state of California, but the impact being felt all across the west coast of the United States. This weather has included thousands, quite literally thousands of dry lightning strikes that have sparked fires throughout the state of California. We've seen wind gusts in Santa Cruz Mountains north of 74 miles per hour, record temperatures that we've experienced, again, not just here in the state of California, but arguably the hottest temperatures we've seen over an extended period of time in close to 70 years on the west coast of the United States, including the headlines that are being garnered around the world with our own Death Valley that may have recorded the hottest temperature in modern recording, period, historically. Some have argued, at least in the last 90 years, but you get the point. 130-degree heat in Death Valley, California yesterday. We are all experiencing rather extraordinary conditions. Those conditions have precipitated, as I said, in a number of new fires in the state of California. Many of those fires under 1,000 acres. Most of those fires in a condition where we are confident we'll be able to tackle, we'll be able to block, we'll ultimately be able to suppress them in relatively short order. There are, however, 4 larger fires, active fires in the state of California. The River Fire, which has generated headlines near Monterey County, Ranch Fire and Lake Fire in LA County area. Of course, the Apple Fire, which is substantially contained down in Riverside. You could see the containment in each and every one of those fires, 10% River Fire, Ranch Fire at 19%, Lake Fire, progress being made, 31% containment. Apple Fire, again, substantially contained. Those are active fires under extraordinary conditions, and it's a way of expressing this heat dome, this heat index has put enormous amount of pressure, not just on all of you individually, but also our firefighters that are dealing with extraordinary circumstances, the likes of which we haven't seen in quite some time here in the state of California. So roughly 15 active fires, most smaller brush vegetation fires. These larger fires we continue to actively monitor. I want to thank the administration, the president, their quick support for what we refer to as an FMAG. You see FMAG has been granted by FEMA, our partners in River Fire and the Apple Fire. That will help with our recovery efforts. It will help with remuneration, will help with our ability to distribute emergency resources in real time. Again, the power and potency of these federal partnerships that clearly are at play at times like these. Of course, times like these also have precipitated in pressure on our energy supply across the West, but particularly here in the state of California. It has put pressure that has created some temporary service interruptions that began on Friday, that moved into Saturday, were substantially mitigated on Sunday, but are very likely to continue today, Tuesday, and likely through Wednesday evening. We're going to talk a little bit more about what we anticipate in a moment, but let me give you a size, a scale, the scope of what occurred when I last left you on Friday. I was handed a note during the midst of my presentation about a new flex alert here in the state of California, that we were looking to be short of the megawatts needed to provide uninterrupted service throughout the state of California, about 1,000 megawatts short of where we needed to be. On Saturday, we fell short roughly 450 megawatts. We were able to turn some things on, address some issues with generators, some peaker plants and the like, look at some load strategies to mitigate and obviate the need for further interruptions. As I said, substantially Sunday, we saw only modest or minor interruptions in service in the state of California. Today, we are anticipating substantially greater need for energy, roughly 4,500 megawatts, 4,400 to be precise, short of where we believe we need to be. Now, that's top line, and I'll explain in a moment that we're not just going to accept that as fate. We're going to try to work to reduce the stress and reduce the need to reach that 4,400 megawatt goal through different strategies, demand reduction, different strategies in terms of procurement of new energy and the like. But this next few days, we are anticipating being challenged as it relates to all of these conditions that have precipitated at once in this historic moment. We always have maintained that, golden oldie, you can't control the weather, but you can prepare for the weather events. And let me just make this crystal clear. We failed to predict and plan these shortages, and that's simply unacceptable. I am the governor. I am ultimately accountable and will ultimately take responsibility, have taken, I assure you, responsibility to immediately address this issue and move forward to make sure this simply never happens again here in the state of California. Began that process again shortly after I left you on Friday, worked throughout the weekend with our Energy Commission, with Cal ISO, our independent system operator, and the California Public Utilities Commission. We've been working with businesses, large and small, and we are working with experts across the spectrum to address the immediacy of this crisis, to understand the conditions that led up to it, and ultimately to address the anxiety that each and every one of you are facing, and to make sure that we never come back into this position again. So right now, California, we are currently and urgently deploying resources across the spectrum, and as I said, working to reduce our energy use. And I'll ask you to participate in that in a moment, but let me first give you an overview of exactly what has occurred and what's happened in terms of those efforts over the course of the last 48 hours. I signed an emergency proclamation that very specifically, very demonstrably and directly shifts energy consumption in this state. We're focused primarily on large energy users, and we are shifting to their backup power so they can utilize that power during the peak hours. We identify the peak hours roughly 3 p.m. About to 9, 10 p.m. Let's say 3 to 10 are the peak hours. I can explain in a moment why those evening hours become the most precious in terms of our concerns, particularly as it relates to sun going down, the utilization of solar, the fact that while we've had some peak gust winds, wind events across the state have been relatively mild. By the way, that's a good thing from a fire suppression perspective. That's an unfortunate moment as it relates more broadly to addressing the episodic nature of the renewable portfolio, of which we are prideful in the state of California, but vulnerable to in these conditions that I have stated. Number two, we have looked to focus on the shared power, the power rather, that we have stored as part of our PSPS protocols in the state. We've talked a lot in the last year about these public power shutoffs and the need to have protocols, not just with PG&E in Northern California, but our other investor-owned utilities, what we refer to as the IOUs. There are new protocols, new procedures that are required of these IOUs as it relates to the utilization of stored energy and power for PSPS. We are going to allow for the utilization for non-PSPS purposes of that stored power pursuant to this emergency proclamation that I've put forward. Accordingly, we're working with ports up and down the state of California. Interestingly, to many of you perhaps, large ships that come in on port, huge container volume, second to none in the United States that comes in and out of the state of California. This is a West Coast port, utilize tremendous amount of energy. And so we're working to reduce the consumption of that energy at the ports to reduce ultimately the amount of energy being pulled off the grid. As I said, we're working with major customers up and down the state and consumers, some of the largest commercial consumers, as well as some well-established consumers that are brands in the state, from Nest to Tesla and others, that have been very helpful and accommodating in terms of putting out messages to their consumer base around the need to reduce usage. We also are working to procure and bring online more energy from LA, DPW or DWP, getting support from the State Water Board as it relates to getting more hydro online. We're looking at peakers. These are our peak generators, called peaker plants, the vernacular of our energy experts, and getting them online, basically putting all our energy to create more energy, all the tools in the toolkit to meet the needs of customers in the next 72 hours. But even with all of that, we are likely to fall short, and we should see some episodic issues as it relates to supplying the coverage that you deserve and you demand. Accordingly, it goes without saying you deserve and also demand what happened and the implications of what this means to the future. And that's exactly what we've initiated over the course of the last 48 hours to understand exactly the relationship, the interrelationship between Cal ISO, between the CPUC and the California Energy Commission. Energy Commission, just to put it in language most of you can understand, does the forecasting in terms of our energy needs. ISO puts out criteria for what's necessary in order to meet that forecast. And the PUC fundamentally focuses on procurement. So it's a shared responsibility between those three agencies. None of us in the state of California are immune nor naive about the hot's getting hotter, the dry's getting drier, the wet's getting wetter. We have long recognized the consequences of climate change. We have long recognized it by also reconciling our responsibility as the largest state in the United States of America to do more and do better in terms of our low-carbon green growth future. We are committed to radically changing the way we produce and consume energy, and we are creating now and have more jobs in this green sector than we do in the fossil fuel space. So we see it as an economic imperative, and we see it as a moral and ethical imperative as it relates to the kind of world we're going to leave, the kind of state and nation we're going to leave to our kids and grandkids.